It is my pleasure to turn the floor over to Haley Pavone. So Haley, please tell us your story.
Absolutely. Just diving right into it. Sure thing. So before I get into the story, I'll do kind of the quick pitch on Passion. Obviously, awesome to see some friendly faces here today and some Passionistas at that. But for those of you that haven't heard about Passion Footwear, to provide a little bit of background on what we'll be talking about today, we are an innovative fashion tech company that has created the world's first fully convertible high heels. So for those of you that don't know what that means, essentially our technology, which is patent pending, is, you can see it looks like a normal shoe, but what sets us apart is you can actually take the high heel itself off and the removable sole support as well, and you're left behind with a full flat. This is a fully flexible material. So it's two shoes in one, and obviously the ultimate solution to high heel pain and inconvenience. I think everybody knows that high heels hurt. I don't know how many women are out there today, or men that have important women in their lives, but I'm sure you've all seen the various use case scenarios of women walking barefoot, lugging around extra shoes, or just suffering, flat out suffering. And we definitely, I'm a little biased, but I think that this two shoes in one concept completely solves all of those problems and really just gives you the best of both worlds. So you don't have to sacrifice comfort or fashion. So that's a little bit about what we do, and I'm super excited to dive into kind of the story of how this all came to be. I've had, definitely a very interesting journey, a lot of talking points as both a student entrepreneur, a female entrepreneur, definitely two, very unique experiences there. I've also had to run this business during the trade war, and also during COVID. So it's been a very much a roller coaster journey. And to Kristen's point in the text, if you guys have questions as this is going on, I'm very much a fireside chat style speaker. So feel free to drop questions in the chat, and Mike's going to help me out with kind of running through those as we go. But so I'll dive a little bit in first to just kind of how this all started. So as I mentioned, I was a college founder. I started this business when I was a junior at Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo. Do we have any Cal Poly alums? If you want to raise your little Zoom hand, maybe? Yeah, great. Up on the Central Coast. So I was studying business entrepreneurship at Cal Poly at the time. I'd always known that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. It's very much in my blood. I was called bossy from the time I was 3. My preschool teacher told my parents I'd either be a CEO or the leader of the mafia. They couldn't tell if I was good or evil, but I was going to be in charge of something. That's like the only thing they could tell about me when I was 3 years old. So I'd felt very comfortable declaring entrepreneurship. I'd always had side hustles growing up and always wanted to do my own thing and, kind of to be a leader and build something of my own. That was what I was really passionate about. But I had way too many ideas when I got into college. I had no clue what I was going to end up making, but I knew a goal for me was to have a company that was ready to take me on full time by the time I graduated school. So I was kind of going through school, learning about entrepreneurship, waiting for inspiration to strike. And for me, inspiration quite literally struck. To dive into this story, I was in my sophomore year when I originally thought of the idea for a convertible heel. It was my spring quarter, and I was actually out at a sorority spring formal event. Don't know if there's any Alpha Chi Omegas out there. But I was out at this sorority event, and I'd worn 6-inch high heels to the event, as college women do, to sorority formals. And I was trying to dance. And I say trying because I don't know how many of you have tried to dance in 6-inch stilettos, but it's really more of a side-to-side wobble. You can't bust a move and break it down. And I really wanted to do that. I wanted to tear up the dance floor. So I ditched my high heels and took to the dance floor barefoot for the sake of comfort, which is what I'd always grown up doing. At any type of event where my high heels had been causing me pain, I had just ditched them and ended up barefoot. So this was super commonplace to me. But unfortunately, on this particular evening, as I said, inspiration and pain quite literally struck when one of the other young women present, who, for point of reference, is actually now a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader, accidentally cheer stomped her ballpoint stiletto through my foot and actually impaled me through the foot. Not one of the more glamorous moments of my life, but given all that's come of it, I guess I can say I'm happy it happened. But as I was sitting on the side of the dance floor, unimpaling myself, I looked around and realized easily 80 to 90% of the other young women at this event were also barefoot. And it just kind of struck me in that moment how strange that is. Everyone knows that high heels hurt. That's not a secret. And yet, really, there were no marketable solutions. You had to go barefoot, bring extra shoes, or just deal with it. And, as I said, I was majoring in entrepreneurship at the time. Coincidentally, earlier that week, I had been in my Entrepreneurship 101 class, and we were having a lecture on what makes good products. And my professor had, kind of given us this one-liner about how the best products solve a pain point, because people are always very eager to spend money to not experience pain or inconvenience. That's, the number one driver of a lot of sales. And so as I'm sitting there, I was thinking, I probably would have spent money to not be impaled right now. If there was something I could have done to still be able to dance, not be wearing my heels, but also not just be barefoot and opening myself up to injury, I 100% would have spent money on that. And so leaving that event, I really became obsessed with the idea. I think for a week straight, I was up until 3 a.m. thinking about how the heck do you take a heel off of a shoe? It physically didn't make sense to me. I'm sitting on the floor of my, studio college apartment, looking at high heels and flats next to each other, thinking the only difference is the heel and the sole support. You should be able to cut it out. I don't understand. And so I then went to summer break. As I said, that was in the spring, studied abroad in Florence, Italy. I'm Italian, so it's always a dream of mine to study abroad there. And while I was there, the idea just really kind of got reinforced for me watching the Italian women who are known for wearing high heels wear these 6-inch heels on cobblestone streets. Like watching them kind of navigate that really reinforced for me, okay, not only is this a great idea, but this is an international idea. This is a problem that a ton of women, dare I say the majority, deal with on a regular basis all around the world. How can that not be the foundation for a fantastic business? So when I came back to Cal Poly to start my junior year, I immediately joined their hatchery program, kind of pitched the idea. I had a 4-page business plan typed out. I was joking with Mike before this. My business plan was, this will be $1 billion brand in 3 years. It's a genius idea. Everything will go right. I'll have the shoe made in 6 months. And, kind of going to the topic of this talk of resiliency, obviously none of that has happened. For the sake of this, I actually revisited that business plan a couple days back, and I thought it was hilarious to just see how optimistic I was about how this thing was going to go. But I do definitely think, we get a lot of messaging in the entrepreneurship world that starting a business is this overnight success process. People just have an idea and suddenly it's worth $1 billion, because that's what we see in Forbes and in TV shows and in movies. But there's a quote from someone, I can't for the life of me remember who it is or exactly how it goes, but the general nature of it is there's a lot of years that go into an overnight success. There's a lot of grunt work and a lot of grind. And so to kind of dive into that side of it, when I started the business, it was October 4th of 2016 was when I officially kind of pitched the idea for the first time. So it's been a little over 4 years now, which is kind of crazy. As much as I'd love to say we're $1 billion brand today, we're not. We have a clear path to get there, but not there today. So we're a little behind my very optimistic schedule. But to kind of talk through, the process since then, I spent the first year really working on it through the university. So for those of you that are students actively right now, something that I would love for you to know and kind of leave today with is that I firmly believe college is one of the best times to start a business. A lot of reasons for this. One is you're used to not having normal schedules. I could work I worked my Starbucks job actually from 5:30 a.m. until 10 a.m. Was already used to that. Then I'd go to class and then I'd work on the business until midnight. And that was just what I was used to doing as a college student anyway. You're used to not having a lot of money, living on pizza, really kind of the entrepreneurship lifestyle and the college lifestyle are very simpatico. You're kind of already mentally prepared to be this starving entrepreneur. So that works out very nicely. But mostly the main reason I think you want to start a business in college is the resources at your disposal, if you're, playing your cards right, are truly limitless. But yes, you can compete in a lot of different competitions that are targeting college students. So I was able to raise our first $26,500 of equity-free funding through college-focused startup competitions. And I was saying, another great part about being a college student when you're starting a business is you're used to stretching a budget, right? Like that $26,500 got us through our entire first year. We were able to make the first wearable prototypes, get our provisional patent filed, hire on a footwear development team, all with $26,500, because I was already very much trained in that mindset of, okay, how am I going to make a buck last as long as possible? So I just firmly believe some of the skills that are naturally present in college students lend themselves very nicely to starting a business. So again, and also another great thing on the college front as well, I am consistently amazed by the kindness and the generosity of university alumni. I know there's some alumni in here tonight. I'd say about 80% of Passion's investors at this point are Cal Poly alumni that loved the idea, wanted to support it. I have countless advisors and mentors and industry experts that have heard about Passion coming out of Cal Poly and reached out, happy to help. I mean, our provisional patent is a great example. An IP attorney who was an alum did it for free. So going back to how did we make that money last so long, it was a big part of the kindness of people affiliated with the university, and also, just the programs at the university as well, helped us try to maximize our resources. So I just think when you're in college, there's definitely a lot of opportunities, really easy ways to get help. People are super eager and super generous to help support the next generation of alumni. And if you can, really maximize that, it's incredible what you're able to make happen. So that was a great experience. Kind of speaking to that point, in the summer between my junior and senior year, I did an accelerator program. So it was 12 weeks, super intensive. I definitely recommend startup accelerators if there is one that isn't taking equity, is a big piece of advice that I would have. I don't really believe in accelerators taking equity. But for me, that 12 weeks was really transformative. As I said, I filed my provisional patent. We really developed the brand, launched the first version of the website, finalized how our mechanism was going to work, or at least how we thought it was going to work then. We have changed it probably 5 or 6 times since then to get to where we are today, as is the nature of startups. We formally incorporated, got our first wearable prototypes, and at the end of that event, we had a big demo day where I got to pitch the business to about 300 investors that were invited. And as a result of that event, I actually raised our first $420,000 in, investor equity fundraising, which was pretty crazy for me because keep in mind, at this point, I'm going into my senior year. So I was 21 years old, pitching VCs and angel investors, which was a crazy experience. I definitely have to say, it was very interesting being a young woman in particular, pushing for fundraising. I can talk more on that later if it interests anyone, but it's definitely, one of the stranger parts of my experience was, I guess I started pitching actually when I was 20. So being 20 years old and walking into these huge boardrooms of people that are significantly my senior, much more experienced, and mustering up the courage to ask them for $420,000, which to me at the time felt like a ton of money. At this point, we've now raised 3 million. So 420 doesn't seem like that much. But at the time, that I wasn't used to having more than $800 in my bank account at a given time. So it was terrifying, but very exciting to actually raise that first bit of money. And obviously that was when things with the company got a little more serious. I'm sure those of you that are in the entrepreneurship scene, definitely you've heard kind of the notion that once you raise money, you can't mess around anymore. It's definitely true. Once you have investors, it's an interesting dynamic where they're not your boss. You're obviously still the CEO and the founder of the company, but you very much, need to report to them, explain to them where their dollar's going, keep them happy. And for me personally, I very much felt kind of responsible to them for sure, in the sense that I knew and was always very aware of how much of a risk it was that people would invest in a 21-year-old woman. Not that we weren't prepared and didn't deserve it, but to me, I guess kind of an insecurity I struggled with as a young entrepreneur was, oh my gosh, people are actually willing to give me money for this crazy idea. So I felt very much kind of a need to make sure that everyone was happy and report back and prove out, hey, you weren't crazy for investing in me. Like, we're actually going to make this happen and it is going to work. So kind of building up that confidence around the board. But then throughout my senior year, things started getting a little more serious. And then we had some real capital. We finalized the product design, open molds and tooling, brought on a full footwear development team. I actually flew to China to meet with our suppliers. One of the more interesting parts of starting this business was we really reinvented the heel. Like, we started from the ground up on how a heel is manufactured. We use none of the same materials and almost none of the same manufacturing processes as any other high heel. So building out our supply chain was a really critical aspect of building this company, because we had to, first of all, find suppliers that were capable of doing what we needed them to do, and then teach them an entirely new process of putting together a high heel. So I actually flew over there in person and was part of that process. It was definitely a hard pitch to a lot of these suppliers, saying, hey, you're going to put 10 times more work into this shoe than any other shoe. We're going to order a fraction of the quantities that you would like to see, and we need you to do it at a price that works for us because we have no money. So those were really fun conversations to try to have through a translator in Chinese. But I'm happy to say we did pull it off, got that supply chain built, and I was actually able to get the first working, finished samples. Up until this point, we'd only had 3D prints that you could kind of wear, but they weren't really shoes. I was able to get the first samples from a shoe factory made of leather that actually worked the night before my college graduation. So I got to wear the first ever convertible high heels, debuted on the Cal Poly graduation stage, which was really awesome. Especially for me, it was a fun moment because I'd spent 2 years at this point just being the crazy shoe gal that was talking about ripping heels off shoes, but no one could see it. Everyone was like, what is Haley doing with her time? What the heck is she going to do after graduation? Why is she not coming out on Friday nights anymore? She's always stressed and losing her mind. So it was fun to actually walk in the shoes and get to do the first disassembly as part of my graduation walk. So very exciting. Immediately dove into doing a Kickstarter campaign, trying to get, enough momentum to get pre-orders placed in the business. We finally, got our first 300 shoes sold, got our production run done. The team was all excited. And then in December of 2018, we had our first big roadblock. I'm happy to say up until that point, everything went relatively smoothly for us. Going back to entrepreneurship is not the glamorous road everyone paves. I'm the first to say we were very lucky in our first 2 years of business. We actually really didn't have that much go wrong, all things considered. The shoes ended up working the way they were supposed to, passed all the tests, got the IP covered, supply chain worked out. It was really kind of a miracle. But our first big hiccup that December was, the factory had given us quotes on what all of the finished molds and tooling to make the product were going to cost. But when you're making something completely new, it's tough for those kinds of things to be accurate. They were basing these quotes off of other high heels they'd made before. They put in a 10% buffer. Oh, it'll probably be 10% more expensive to get this done, right? So we had built our whole budget and, raised that $420,000 around these quotes that we were given. And it's also tough when you're doing international business. A lot of stuff can kind of get lost in translation. And this was one of those times where it was not well communicated to us. Hey, things are going over budget. Hey, just a heads up, you're going to need more money. Basically, the first we heard about the fact that the project was more expensive was when we got an invoice that was going to be due in 30 days. And it was 5 times bigger than we had been told it was going to be. So all of a sudden we went from, we have 4 months of money in the bank. We can launch these, we can ship these 300 units, get the shoes made and go rock and roll, to we're out of money in 30 days when we have to pay this invoice. Actually, we're not just out of money, we're $80,000 in debt if we don't get this figured out. And so it was one of the scariest times in my life, for sure. Like I said, talk about a whirlwind. I went from feeling secure on top of the world, we're going to crush it, to holy cow, I may have to let everyone go. And at this point, I had graduated and come on full time. So it was also, how am I going to make my rent? How am I going to tell my parents, like, guys, I've failed, it was absolutely insane. But I buckled down, going back to resiliency. Entrepreneurship, these are the kinds of things that happen when you're trying to make something new. Going back to that invoice being off, it's not like it was anyone's fault. How was the factory supposed to know what this was going to cost? No one has ever made some of the parts that we have to make this shoe. Like, they didn't exist. We've had to completely invent them. So it was impossible for them to have an accurate quote. Maybe they couldn't have been 5 times underneath what it ended up being, but there was always going to be some kind of discrepancy that we couldn't really predict. So what really sets apart entrepreneurs that make it from entrepreneurs that don't, and I firmly believe this, is just a determination and a refusal to give up. Like, I was reading a book on entrepreneurship, actually, and that was one of the key takeaways, was if you look at successful people throughout the course of history, they come from every given background, gender, race, anywhere in the world, there's people that have been successful. The only unifying factor amongst all of them is that they've refused to fail. They've figured stuff out. Like, they just looked the fear of failure in the face and said, not today, I'm going to get this handled. And so at this point, I was 22 years old. I sat down, looked at the budget, and was like, okay, I have to pay this invoice in 30 days. Otherwise, they're not going to ship any of our product. That was the leverage they had on us, was if you don't pay us, you don't get your 300 shoes, you can't meet your Kickstarter orders, and you can't launch your business. So it was like, okay, I need to raise money. Looked at the budget for the next year, because you want to try to raise a year's worth of money. And I realized, all right, if I'm going to do this, I need to find $1 million in 30 days or we're screwed, basically. And so I buckled down for 30 days straight. I woke up, I pitched like crazy. I drove all over the West Coast, didn't have enough money to fly. So just got in my Ford Fiesta with crank windows and drove all over the place, meeting with people. I took, if I had to add it up, probably about 40 rejections. And I kid you not, on the 29th day, like, I was already emailing all my vendors saying, I don't think I'm going to be able to pay any of these bills. I was letting my team know, like, guys, I don't think payroll's happening this month. I was emailing my landlord trying to figure out how I was going to deal with my rent. And on the 29th day, I found $1 million investor. It was the most insane thing of my life. I don't mean to say that that's going to be everyone's experience, but that's what it was for me. And that's kind of what it takes, is going out there and pounding the pavement and just refusing to not meet that goal that you have. And so that was a saving grace for us. That really saved the business. We really came within 24 hours of just completely failing with all of our products stuck in China.
So Haley, I'm sorry to interrupt. Let's stop there for a second. We'll come back to that spot. I think it's a good place to stop.
Cool.
To pause for a second. I want to go back to college for a sec.
Sure. Go to town.
What did you major in?
I was a business entrepreneurship major.
Business entrepreneurship. So when it came to the technology of taking that idea and making it something real, you needed technical expertise. How did you find that?
Absolutely. So there were a couple different things. First, I, to your point, needed some engineers, people with IT or engineering experience. So the way I actually found my first hire, who was my co-founder of the business, her name was Tyler. There wasn't a lot of logic to it, to be honest. I just knew, to me, the most important thing for the first person I brought in was that I trusted them. Mm-hmm. I appreciated very early on that our tech that we were working on was very disruptive, and that it needed to be kind of ghost protocol for a while until we could get it together enough to get that provisional patent. And so to me, I wanted someone I could trust. So as I mentioned, I was in a sorority, Alpha Chi Omega. I literally went to the sorority page and filtered all of the gals by who is an engineer, who is in IT, not to reinforce the sorority stereotype, but one girl came up and I didn't know her that well, but I shot her a message and said, hey, we're in the same group. That's enough for me to trust you. Can I pitch you this crazy idea that I have? And I took her to Starbucks, bought her a coffee, and literally sketched out my concept for how this thing would work on a Starbucks napkin, gave it to her and said, what do you think? Do you think you could make this? Is it something you would want to make? She took probably about 24 hours to think about it. And to my surprise, got back to me and said, yeah, I think this is great. Let's try to make it. So it was a very unscientific process to make that first hire. And then actually our second hire as well, who's, I'm happy to say, still with me to this day. He was my first full-time employee after he graduated and is still full-time with us now. We knew we needed a mechanical engineer on board, someone that could really do the heavy duty engineering for this. And another one of those kind of freak kismet things, as I said, nothing really went wrong for 2 years by some miracle. I was in the Starbucks line with my co-founder, and we were talking about how it was like 2 weeks until summer when we had this accelerator program. We knew we needed an engineer, but we didn't know any engineers that didn't already have jobs. And what engineer is going to want to work on high heels for free, right? And I kid you not, this guy taps me on the shoulder behind me in line. And I turn around and he goes, I'm sorry, I couldn't help but overhear you. I'm an engineer. I am not doing anything this summer. And I used to take footwear design courses at FITM in the summers in high school. He's like, I'd love to work with you. So one of those just kind of freak things. And as I said, he's still with us to this day. So I just got very lucky with the first people that I brought on. And
this is all in San Luis Obispo. This is all part of that community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which is if you want to look at an example of what a startup community should be, I'd encourage people to go look at what goes on in San Luis Obispo, because it's this really interesting the hothouse where a lot of the hub of a lot of this activity is in downtown San Luis Obispo, and there's this incredible community outreach around it, and this community of entrepreneurs who love to help.
Absolutely.
So kismet. It's a little bit of kismet. It's being in the right place at the right time too.
Absolutely. Well, and to your point, I think it's very much the community of the area. Yeah. Everyone's very entrepreneurial. And to your point, just really eager to help and excited by new ideas. So it was great.
Okay, so let's talk about the idea for just a sec, because something I've noticed about you, about the company, is when you pitch this idea to a woman and the response is almost uniformly the same. And that's, I love it. This is cool. I would buy this. You pitch it to a guy and the response is not the same. It's more glazed eyes. And yeah, I guess I have no idea. I've never worn heels. How do you convince a guy that this is a good idea, especially if it's a guy who the investor, and sadly that's who most investors are, that you have to convince them that this is the right idea and overcome that criticism or that ignorance.
Absolutely. No, to your point, it was a very difficult thing for me at first. I kind of loosely touched on being a young woman in these meetings was very surreal. Mm-hmm. To your point, I can't even count how many VC or angel group meetings I've had where I walk in and it's 20 older gentlemen that have never worn a high heel before and could care less about high heels. And I'm trying to convince them that this is a good idea and to take it seriously. So I had to get creative. My first couple pitches just majorly flopped. They're like, I don't care, please leave. And what I finally figured out worked for me was I needed to make it more personal for them, make it more real. And how do you make high heels personal to, a guy that doesn't wear them? You bring in the women that are important in their lives. And so for me, what I started doing is, when the first question was, I don't wear high heels, how am I supposed to understand this? I would say, okay, with all due respect, let's break for 5 minutes. I would like you to step out. I want you to call your wife, sister, mother, daughter, whoever it is that's important woman to you, and give her the synopsis of the idea and let me know what she has to say. And to your point, every single one of them would come back into the room and go, all right, you have another 30 minutes. Like, clearly I need to listen to this idea based on the response I just got on the phone. And that's worked really well for me, is just, trying to bring that more personal aspect into it and kind of paint the picture the best I can to them of this is something that women will use. And it's a gigantic market that needs to be taken seriously.
Excellent. That's it for the students in the room. There's a life lesson right there, is telling a room full of VCs, let's take a break and go call your significant others. I love that. Okay, so let's go back to, you've just had this, you've overcome this big obstacle, you found $1 million investor. So I know I have some of my global entrepreneurship students in the room, and they have international questions. So let's start with dealing with the Chinese manufacturer. What was the hardest part about that? And knowing what you now know, and having been through a trade war that isn't over yet.
Still in a trade war, yeah.
Yeah. So would you still go to China for your manufacturing? Do you think that that's the right way to do it, or do you think that there might be, as Passion gets bigger, another way to do this?
Sure. Yeah, I definitely think there might be other countries for us to look at further down the road. Although something I'll say, this has become a very popular question when I'm pitching VCs is, why are you in China? There's a trade war going on. What are you doing? Something that's unique about the footwear industry is because it's a physical good, and particularly something like ours that requires so many different parts, the lead time is very, very long. Like it takes 12 months for a new style and 18 to 24 months to develop a new shoe shape. So something I always say is, although this is a popular topic right now, keep in mind when we picked China to work with, it was, we had to make that decision in 2017. So it was a very different climate. So I don't regret picking China at the time. It was the best trade climate, the lowest duty rates, and they do have really high quality footwear production. Part of why we picked China is they are the experts in injection footbeds, which is what our product uses. So no regrets with the decision. Obviously, it's become a bit of a different situation since then. And we are actively looking at, potentially some other countries. The world's also changed very dramatically since the trade war started, where, as I said, initially, you really could only go to China for this kind of production. But now, because of the trade war, other countries are investing in and developing these technologies so that they can take that business at a more affordable tariff rate. So it's starting to become more realistic that we could look at most likely Mexico, which I'd be super excited about. That would be fun. So we'll see how it works out. But long and short, yes, we are looking at other places, but no regrets on the choice that we made. It definitely made the most sense at the time. And as far as the biggest challenge with working in China, I'd say this is going to seem kind of obvious, but the cultural differences, the main one being, and this is not going to sound bad initially, but I have found in my experience that culturally, the Chinese don't like to say no, like as a general business practice. They don't like to say, we can't do that, or we can't do it at that budget. You'll say, hey, I want to make this crazy shoe. I want it to cost $35 and I want to do it in 6 months. And they go, yep. And they know full well that it's not going to happen that way, but they prefer to tell you on the back end. It was kind of what I experienced with the mold costs of I'd committed to this pricing for multiple months. Obviously, it was evident on their end that costs were racking up well above that, but they didn't want to disappoint us. They don't break bad news well, even though when it's something like that, you need that information. Like even if it's not the information you want, you really need it for planning purposes. So that's definitely been our biggest challenge. It's still something we deal with to this day. They say that things will be delivered certain days. It ends up being weeks later. And again, it's a cultural thing of they don't want to say no. It's very seen as very negative in business and their culture to bring any negativity into the conversation. And I definitely respect that. But for us, we've had to become culturally aware that that's going on and plan accordingly. We have to pad our budgets. We have to pad our timelines and always kind of be thinking, okay, is what they're saying realistic? Is what they're committing to realistic? Are we having transparent conversations, or are we getting the sugar-coated version of what's going on? And also at this point, we've been working with a lot of our suppliers long enough that we've brought some of the American culture in as well. We've had those conversations of, we're not mad when you tell us the truth. It actually is very good for us to know what's going on. So it's been getting better as we've gone on. But that's definitely been the biggest challenge, is just navigating how our different cultures approach business conversations and the way of presenting information. Yeah. It's different in ways you wouldn't expect, and it can be very difficult when you don't know what's going on.
Okay, so let's go back to your $1 million investor. So you're back on track.
Mm-hmm.
Now what?
Yes, we were back on track. So we were able to obviously get our Kickstarter pairs out, and also, start ordering inventory to go live as a business, leave the pre-order phase and actually bring this product to market. Mm-hmm. So we spent a good 6 months building out our website, our full e-commerce operation, making sure that, if you tried to order a shoe, it actually shipped out of a warehouse. It didn't just disappear into the cyberverse, which was a whole fun little experiment. And we launched the business officially on June 24th of 2019. So it's been about 1.5 years now that we've been doing sales. So we officially transitioned into the revenue generating phase of a business, which I have to say, it's very exciting, but it's also very different. All of your goals, all your metrics, everything you care about completely changes. And suddenly everything's just about, how do we make money? How do we grow this business? Yeah. And so that's really been kind of the phase that we're still in to this day. We're talking about growth. It's been the last 1.5 years. I'm happy to say we are about to do our first $1 million. We're probably going to cross that this month. So we're very excited about that. Very, very cool to see. It's been very interesting to still be growing as a business during this COVID time. We've actually grown about 5x since January of this year, which I'm super stoked about. But as you can imagine, again, kind of going to adversity, when the news of COVID broke in March, we're all thinking, who the heck's going to wear high heels in a pandemic? That's not going to be a thing. So we had to really kind of redo our marketing strategy and focus more on, kind of buying for the future, buying for future events, because even though people are home right now, eventually certain things are going to come back. Like date nights are coming back, weddings are coming back, travel is not going away. There's these very key markets that our product applies to, and really kind of messaging that in a hopeful way to the consumer of, you might not be doing it now, but you will in the near future. And we're also very lucky in the sense that your shoe size never changes. I know a lot of apparel has struggled because people's body weights and shapes are fluctuating a little bit in COVID. It's a little hard to reliably buy clothes, but your foot is the size that it is. So we can sell people shoes to use 1 year from now, and they'll know that it still fits. So we've had to really kind of reposition ourselves around some of those challenges in order to keep up with that growth. But I'm happy to say that we have, and it's been a whirlwind. Again, that focus has really been figuring out who our customer is, how our brand voice speaks to her, what kind of products does she want to see from us next, and how do we really optimize this business for growth and take it to the next level? Because the end goal for Passion is to be a Steve Madden size brand that's just bringing this convertible heel tech to the mass market and making this the norm. I don't think people should buy 150 Steve Maddens anymore. They should buy 2 shoes and 1 for 150 from us. So it's making that into a reality.
There are a few questions in the chat about product and about your business model. So obviously this is a fashion-based product. Where do you draw your inspiration to design the shoes so that, it's one thing to be functional, but they still need to look good, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, and it is interesting because we are a fashion product. We're a tech product in the fashion space. Mm-hmm. Something that we've actually struggled a lot with from, kind of a design and more so a marketing standpoint is we've really created a new category of footwear. Mm-hmm. Our joke is no one's used to shoes coming with instructions. So it's the first shoe where you have to learn how to use it, and kind of communicating that to the customer has been one of our bigger challenges. But from a style standpoint, at least initially, we're kind of taking our cues from big successes in the footwear e-com space like Rothy's and Allbirds, where we're not trying to have 10,000 styles. We're trying to have, maybe eventually I think the goal is to get up to 10, but 10 core styles in a variety of colors and materials that are very good staple products. Like, this is our Passionista style. You can dress it up, you can dress it down. I mean, really our whole value as a brand is 2 shoes in one: practicality, comfort. It can be an everyday shoe. It's a shoe for any occasion, because you can throw the heel on to go to your meeting or out for the night, and then put on the flat to, run to the grocery store. So we're really just focusing on elegant, simple, timeless, classic styles, playing around a little bit more with colors and patterns and that kind of thing. But at least so far, we've kept our design thesis very much to simple basics, which also works nicely when you're trying to grow, because you can sell pretty much anybody a shoe that looks like this. So
it's in keeping with what makes your shoe special, because the shoe at its heart is about utility.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a fashion aspect to it if you still want it to look good, obviously, but we're not competing on the value of, say, a Louis Vuitton, who's like, oh, I have the most avant-garde, crazy on-trend style you've ever seen. That's not our business. Our business is, here's a shoe, you can wear to anything all the time and feel and look great.
And how does that tie into your pricing? How do you price your shoes compared to your competition? And then beyond that, who do you think your competition is?
Sure. So it kind of depends on how you want to define competition. I see 2 different aspects. One is the removable heel market. So some people, if you Google, removable heel, convertible heel, whatever, there's a couple other companies that do interchangeable heels, which is a different tech from what we do. You can swap, a 4-inch block for a 3-inch stiletto, but really they're bringing the value of multiple looks on one shoe. You can't go heel to flat and truly have 2 different shoe functions. So that's what sets us apart. So we kind of see them as competition, in the sense that when investors were pitching Google removable heel, those companies come up and I get asked about them as competition, but we don't really see ourselves taking that customer. That being said, we are significantly more affordable than all those brands. But moving past that, we really see our competition, and I would define competition as, who are we taking customers from? Like, what brand right now is getting our consumers dollar, and we're trying to convince her to give that dollar to us instead. We've done a bunch of research on this, and we've actually pretty much proven the answer is the Steve Madden customer. It fits our demographic. And as far as pricing strategy, Steve Madden usually runs for high heels about 110 to 150, and for flats somewhere between 50 to 80. Our average price point is 165, so a little bit more expensive, but the way that we see it, we're 2 shoes in one. So when you consider what you'd have to pay to get a matching heel and flat from him, we are a much more favorable option from a value for dollar side.
Okay. Interesting. Shoes are an interesting market, because you think, oh, okay, well, we've got it all figured out, but the fact of the matter is they change a lot.
They change all the time.
And marrying that the intersection of your customer and what they need is an interesting kind of a moving target, right?
Definitely. Well, and you have to merge trend on top of that. And trend's tough, because like I said, you have to design shoes about a year out. So we're in meetings right now about what's going to be hot next winter. Who knows? So it's fun.
I'm curious about, it was interesting to hear Amy come on and say she's a passionista. She obviously believes in your product and likes using that word. Is there a business model aspect of your company that is about something other than the shoes?
About something other than the shoes.
Yeah.
There is a new portion of our business model coming out at shoe adjacent. It's a part of the shoes. I don't know how to exactly answer that. But no, obviously our main priority is selling the shoes. But that being said, we do see a unique opportunity where, since you can take the heels off, to have actually the first custom shoe, like full custom high heel product on the market. So a little bit of a sneak peek, a business model that we're going to be dropping in the 3rd quarter of 21, and then also in the 4th quarter of 21, is a full customization platform. So for those of you that have shopped on Nike or Adidas's website, you've seen, you can go in and pick the colors of different parts of the shoe. You can really kind of build what you want. We're going to split out all of our parts separately and provide that same experience. So you can pick the upper by color and material that you want, the heel, height, size, shape, whatever. If you want a different color on the undersole, you could pick that. And that's really not something that's been done in high heels yet. So we're very excited to bring that custom model to market. And then going off that in Q4 of next year, we're looking into actually a subscription model for some of our more loyal Passionistas that maybe have the basic, black shoe or a nude shoe. We would do a quarterly heel kit subscription. So every quarter they would get exclusive access to 3 different heel designs that could match their shoe, pick the one that they'd like, and have exclusive heel offerings to kind of mix up their look. So we're building those into the business model as well.
Okay, and going back to Q&A. This is from our dean, so I have to ask it. He would like to know if there's a men's line in the future, if the value proposition translates to men. And I don't know if he wears heels or not.
I was going to say, it depends if you wear heels. We get that question a ton, actually. This has been brought up. I don't know if this is what he was referring to, but apparently men's dress shoes are really uncomfortable. A lot of guys want the lift taken out of the dress shoe.
Gerhard, would you care to clarify? You don't need to admit anything.
Big high.
Let me quickly unmute myself. You know what? It was sort of the women's line begged that question whether there is a men's line, and I imagine that you might not want to stay a one-trick pony, right? So you might just look for a specific problem that men have with their shoes. It might not be the collapsible heel, but maybe there is another niche, right?
Sure. Hey, sky's the limit. If there's a demand for it, I'm open to it. To your point, though, about not wanting to be one trick, our main goal right now is to expand into different types of footwear. So far, we've had very much, kind of sandal styles, which work for the summer and the spring. We recently came out with a pump, but we're developing boots, ankle boots. I mean, something that's actually very unique about the technology is since it's only on the underside of the shoe, we can make any kind of shoe. So we can expand pretty indefinitely on just the women's side. But if I come up with a really compelling idea for men's shoes, I'm happy to throw that into the mix as well. Why not?
Maybe there's a men's dress shoe that's a combination of a walking shoe and a dress shoe. I don't know, right?
Hey, I like that idea. There we go. There it is. Yeah, for sure.
We're coming up on our hour, and I think we could probably be here for another hour if we wanted. But I want to end with this because I think it's really important to talk about this because we have to. Half the population of the world is not half the population of entrepreneurs. It's especially difficult to be a woman founder. And I go all the way back to one of the first things you said was when you were young, you were called bossy. Mm-hmm. And that we have these stereotypes about women that we attribute the same behavior in a young woman we call bossy, where in a young man we would call it leadership or initiative. So what is it about? What advice would you give to our young women entrepreneurs in the audience who are looking at you saying, I want that, how do I get there? And how do I overcome those obstacles that shouldn't be there but are?
For sure. I mean, I think it goes back loosely to what I was saying before about, what makes entrepreneurs successful is never giving up. I think the same thing applies obviously to female entrepreneurs. There's more hurdles to overcome, but you have to keep pushing. Something I've talked about multiple times in various talks like this is the fact of the matter is I have experienced discrimination, very notably. I've been in numbers of meetings where inappropriate things have been said to me. Are you single? Will you go to dinner with me? Will you go to dinner with my son? I was told by an investor that he doesn't invest in pretty women because they're dumb and just stop working. He only invests in ugly women because they work harder. So that's just one. I mean, I've been told I only get investment because of my appearance. Like the list goes on. I can give like 25 different examples of truly atrocious things that have been said to me in pitches, but you have to keep pushing. Like, I think it's kind of a discussion of that's the reality right now. And the only way we change that reality is by women being strong enough to keep going and fighting their way to that seat at the table. Like, it's not just going to happen overnight. There's not just going to be this magical day where it's all women in investment rooms, right? I'd love if that was the case. But what it really takes is the women of today saying, we're done with this. We're going to keep going. You're not going to get me down, and pushing and pushing and pushing so that 10 years from now, it can be 50, 60, 70% women at those tables. So it's that resiliency and, you know, that refusal to give up and taking those kinds of things in stride. It is uncomfortable and it does happen more than it should. But something else I've found and I've been very pleased to see is for every one of those interactions that I have, there's a handful more of people that are really, really positive and so supportive. Like those ones, obviously, you know, they hurt, they sting, they stand out because they're so terrible. But I also have dozens of incredible conversations where people say, I love what you're doing. I want to see more women in entrepreneurship. You know, this is a personal cause for me. And I get why this is important and why this matters. And there's, you know, for every voice that wants to put you down, there's voices that want to build you up. You just have to have enough perseverance and confidence and resilience to, you know, sit there during those bad conversations. And I don't mean sit there quietly. Believe me, I have my comebacks lined up that I'm ready to use because that's just the kind of person I am. But you have to deal with that and keep pushing to get to the meetings with the people that do care and do get it and are of the times and are willing to support you. So I think that's the general advice, is just be prepared, know that it is possibly going to happen and that that's unfortunate, but by sitting there and refusing to let it stop you, you are being part of the change that needs to happen. And the more women that are willing to do that, the faster the change will come.
Excellent. I think that's the perfect note to end this session on. What an inspiring story. Congratulations.
Thank you.
We hope you'll come back someday when you go public and have another story to tell about obstacles you've overcome and the successes you've had. Thank you very much for doing this. We very much appreciate it. Thanks everyone for coming. This is the end of our session. Next month, our speaker is another young entrepreneur. His name is Johnny Fayyad, and his company is called Eat Your Coffee, the caffeinated energy bars. So we're going to hear from Johnny in December. So we'll see you then. Thank you very much.